team.
Hello, this is Malorian. This is the Orc Tactical Team, and today we're going to be talking about a topic suggested by Steve Walker on the Google Plus page, the YouTube Battle Reporters, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart, and it's one I can actually talk for quite a bit, so let's get at it. And it's really, what's the purpose of Black Orcs? What do they do in the army, and what's some of the tricks and tips? So getting into it, I'm going to start with the devil's advocate side and say, you know what? Black Orcs suck. The reason why Black Orcs suck is because they die just the same as any other orc, and then for the same time they're taking up your special, and even when you're taking this unit that's supposed to be your elite, they only have 2 strength 5 attacks, when your Savage Orc Biggins will have 3 strength 5 attacks, and you can even just take regular Orc Biggins with an extra chopper, and they'll also have 2 strength 5 attacks. So why the hell would I take Black Orcs? So that's really the devil's advocate. And I guess the biggest thing to say here is that when people look at it this way, they're not really understanding the purpose of the unit. Now, yes, there is the option to use the 2 choppas and you have the 2 strength 5 attacks. But honestly, that's really one of their pluses as opposed to their negatives, because really, that's not their primary mode of being used. That's an option that, hey, whenever this is better, they can go to 2 hand weapons, but usually they're there for the big hit. Now, let's start this off, and we'll start from the bottom, from some of the smaller things, and work our way up to some of the more important things. So the very first thing to look at here is, let's first define the points. Well, a Black Orc just naked is going to be 12 points. If you take that Orc Biggin and give him an extra choppa, he's going to be 9 points. And even a Savage Orc Biggin, it's going to be 11 points with the extra choppa. So out of all those 3, the Black Orc is the most expensive. Now, what are you getting for that difference? Well, for starters, you're getting heavy armor. Now, like I said, we're starting at the small things first. The heavy armor is better, of course, than the light armor of their Orc Biggin. It works out to about roughly the same as the Savage Orc Biggin, because, I mean, the 6+ ward save doesn't get reduced, but, you know, strength 4 being kind of the average will work out to be about the same. It really is situational, but you can kind of see them as the same thing. The nice thing is with that 5+ save is that when you do have that light shooting, the arrows and stuff, it's going to save you 1/3 of the time. Now, while we're on this topic, let's move on and say, well, Malorian, why don't you take shields? Then you have a 4+ save against shooting. I just don't see it being worthwhile. Now, what it does give you is, yes, sure, it gives you a 4+ save, but really what you need, if you have a horde of, let's say, 40, is you really need to save a little bit more than 3 models to make up those points. Now, the odds of you taking all this shooting, sure, might happen if you're playing against a lot of wood elves or a lot of dark elves with their crossbows, but for the most part, you're not going to be seeing shooting like this. You're going to be hit by things like, you know, the trebuchets or strength 5, or cannons or grudge throwers are set up to be strength 5 or 6, and they're going to be blowing you apart anyway. Or your attacks are going to be in combat, and you're probably not going to be going with sword and board. And the reason for that is because, again, just like I said, the 2 choppas is not going to be your main mode of attack. The sword and board is even more of a corner case. Really, the only time you're going to be going with the sword and board, shield and hand weapon, for those that aren't catching my drift, is when you've already gone to a big fight, you've lost a lot of your guys, and it's really a thing where, okay, I'm going to win these combats anyway, I'm just trying to not get wiped out and give up these numbers. So this is a thing where, like, okay, you already destroyed their Saurus with your Black Orcs, and now you're trying to fight like this units of skinks, and they're trying to kill the last guy, something like that. Okay, maybe, but again, like, these are so small a corner case, and the times I'll actually make the difference is very, very rare. And like we said, in shooting, sure, you're going to get that extra save, but for the most part, why don't you just take more guys? Or like we said, for the 40, that's 40 points. A little bit more points added on top of that, and you got a chariot. This chariot is going to be giving you a use all the time, whereas these shields will be very, very situational. So let's not even look at that. Shields, just go to erase it from your book. You know, this is Malorian approved. Take your black marker and just cross it off of your book there. It's not really even an option. Okay, now let's look at the next thing that's also very handy for them. And that's the whole idea with their immune to psychology. Now, At first, you might not think of this being that big of a deal because, oh, whatever, I'll be near the general and they cause a panic test or a fear test. It's leadership 9 or 8 re-rolled, I'll be fine. Well, really, what this really stops is all the really big shenanigans you start seeing in more tournament play. So maybe it's going to be guys hit you with Doom and Darkness, and then you're going to hit you with a hell, or what is it? Hell Cannon. And they're going to make you take this test like -4 and try and send you panicking off the board. Or maybe you're up against vampires or tomb kings, and they're going to have all the synergies in there to really make you fail that fear test. So that even though you're better than them in combat, that's not going to be the case when you're weapon skill 1. All these shenanigans, impossible, just will not happen. And it's really nice to have that reliability. The other thing, too, you have to keep in mind, though, is the fact that they can't flee. That's always going to be the negative to Immunopsych. That sure, you don't care about fear, terror, and panic. However, you also can't flee these charges. Now, what that really means is you have to be just a little bit more careful whenever you're going and charging. If you're going to charge and overrun, normally if you're showing your flank, it's like, okay, at least I caught these guys, I can flee, and then I can regroup. Well, you can't do that with Black Orcs. So you always have to be thinking ahead and planning them, so knowing that, okay, know your distances, know your angles, where things are going to be, because fleeing just will not be an option. But this is just something where I see it again, where really if you're a skilled player, you take this, you basically counter it just with playing better, and then all of a sudden all you're left with is that bonus. The bonus that whenever you are playing against one of these leadership style armies that are trying to break you down and make you panic, or leadership 1, whatever it is, that won't be an issue because you're immune to psych. Even stuff where all of a sudden you're up against the dwarves and they're going to try and force you to charge them with their Master Rune of Challenge. All of a sudden, no, that doesn't work because you're immune to psych and that doesn't work on you. So very nice thing to have. The very next thing to talk about the next thing that's important, is the fact that they're also immune to animosity. And this is really big because really when you look through the Orc and Goblin book, we are amazing, right? Like I was just talking about, like stuff with like the Savage Orc Biggins. 11 points for 3 strength 5 attacks. Meanwhile, Ogres are paying 30-something points for 3 strength 4 attacks. This is crazy, right? We have damage output out the yin-yang. However, the big thing is that we don't have that reliability because we have animosity and we have stupidity and we have low leadership. And so even though my Savage Orcs are right there ready to tear your face off, hey, they're fighting with these Wolf Riders instead. Well, the Black Orcs, you have that dependability. They are never going to suffer from that. If you need to know that, okay, these guys have to be over here, it's going to be taking me 3 turns of movement, you know that one of those turns won't be stolen away. That all the time they'll be able to do exactly what you want. And that's like priceless. That's so nice. The other thing too is that animosity also screws up your characters. Because if you have your bunker or something fail animosity, guess what? You get no magic phase. And that can be killer, right? All of a sudden you're not going to be dropping down the foot or whatever else you need to happen. You just don't get that magic phase. Or maybe you have like some support mage that's to try and do the whole thing by himself. Well, all of a sudden if you put this level 4 in with those Black Orcs, this is now no longer a worry. You know all the time you will not be failing animosity. You will always have your magic phase. Now, while we're on this subject here, let's just say you do have to play this a little bit smart. You want to have that great shaman who already is pretty good. I mean, at toughness 5 and 3 wounds, even naked, he can usually go through 1 round of combat and be just fine. However, you want him on the edge of the unit so that there's the fewest amount of attacks going on him. Plus, if he explodes, he's not going to be exploding as many of your guys. Some of the nice defensive gear you can put on him is the 4+ ward is nice. It's also nice to go with the fencer blades. I'm also a big fan of the potion of toughness. It's a little bit cheaper. You got to kind of plan ahead for it. But if you go into combat and you're toughness 8, you'll be fine. So these things, you can make work together, and it's just really great to have that option. Another thing I like to do is that in that first turn where sometimes it's like, okay, you fail that animosity of your bunker, and all of a sudden you can't move as far up with your lines and all this stuff. What I'll do is I'll start with my mage in with the Black Orcs. The other parts of the line can move up. The bunker will move up. Mage will move back, join the bunker, and then the Black Orcs move up. And then basically what you did is you bought a free pass from animosity stopping your magic on the first turn. You're not worried about being in combat because you're not in those black orcs anymore. You're back there in the bunker, and sure, you might fail animosity later down the road, but the main thing is that first turn, free pass. It was all just because you had black orcs in your list, and you just played it wisely. Now, while we're talking about that, let's talk about the next little trick thing here. We can actually use black orcs as a bunker. It might sound kind of crazy, but really 120 points for 10 black orcs for being your bunker really isn't all that bad of an idea. The real reasons here is a whole idea where, for the most part, for the long range shooting, 10 wounds when it's toughness 4 in the large bases, you can get by with it. Sure, if you take the 20 Night Goblins, that's 60 points. So this is double the cost of that for half the wounds. But hey, you're now having the extra toughness. It's a larger base, so those things dropping down will be hitting less of them. Hell, you can always make them as a line of 10 to really reduce the amount of template damage they can do to you. And at the same time, what you have is a unit that's a lot stronger in combat. Of course, we already talked about they're immune to psych, immune to animosity. And hey, if you get that fast cab that's come around that's going to fight you, your Night Goblins might be a little bit scared about trying to fight this out because they'll probably be ground down. Your black orcs, just 10 of them can usually destroy whatever type of fast cav you see, right? You got some teardowns coming in or something like that. Yeah, you can fight those guys off, no problem. So are they the perfect bunker? No. Are they a viable bunker? Absolutely. Another way I've seen sometimes here too is where they go with a middle type thing, where they'll have their main battle line going across and then like a medium-sized unit of black orcs for their bunker. We're talking somewhere in the range of around 15. And what this really does is that the main line moves up, fights, and assuming that something goes wrong, your black orcs can now move into that area. So what they've done for you, if they've provided you with that a panic-free, animosity-free bunker, and all of a sudden they're a solid unit to fight at the end. Again, it's only 15, but by the time something broke through your lines, they're probably also reduced in number to the point where all of a sudden your black orcs can take those guys on. 15 black orcs, they still do a good amount of damage. So that's also something you have there too. Now, the next thing we should start talking about, that's really the main thing about the Black Orcs and why they're so awesome, and the number one reason why every Orc and Goblin player should really seriously think about taking these orcs these Black Orcs and all their lists, is the Strength 7. You got these orcs that can go to great weapons, chopper rule. Strength 7 is massive. Because what you really see in the Orc and Goblin army is this plateau. A lot of other armies, they're either Strength 3 or Strength 4. Maybe a few choice units are Strength 5. But you know what? Orcs and Goblins, we have a lot of Strength 5. We got regular Orc Biggins. We got the Savage Orc Biggins. We got the Trolls. We got the Squig Hoppas. We got the Boars. Whenever they charge in, they're Strength 5. All those chariots. If you get a boar chariot, them and the riders, they're Strength 5. And that's kind of like the line. The problem is, though, is that when you start going against some of these monsters that are the higher toughness, like toughness 6 to 8, or when you're looking at these high armor saves, somewhere around like the 1+ type thing, toughness 5 or strength 5 just doesn't really do it anymore. When you're needing these 5s or 6s to wound, they're just piddling away and it's gone. All of a sudden, if it's a 1+ save, sure, you brought it down to a 3+ save, but that might not be enough to get the job done. And the worst thing you want to see with your Savage Orcs is they go into some Skull Crushers, or chances are the Skull Crushers actually went into you, and all of a sudden, sure, you might have done some damage to them, but they did a lot of damage to you. You lose combat, and all of a sudden now you're in a situation where you have lost your chopper rule, you have lost your frenzy, and you're not looking that hot anymore, because from now on they're going to have a 2+ save. Meanwhile, you have the Black Orcs. So here's this plateau of Strength 5. Bam, you got Strength 7. So what this is doing is that even if you're up against, say, like the War Sphinx from the Tomb Kings, even on something at toughness 8, you're still wounding on a 5+ and doing all those wounds. And of course, the extra thing in that thing is once you do some wounds there, it's going to be crumbling even more. Against the other guys, the other monsters that are strength 5 or 6, you're wounding on 2+ or 3+. You're crushing these guys. And a lot of times, too, you're going to have a higher weapon skill. So it's like 3+, 3+, or 3+, 2+. These guys are monster killers. Especially when you combine this with the fact that they can get magic banners, which the Savage Avjork Biggins can't get. And sure, the Orc Biggins can get that, but they're kind of a different class of their own type thing. But your Black Orcs could take that Flaming Banner, and all of a sudden, those things that have the regen, those monsters that depend on it, like the Hydras and your Hell Pits and stuff like that, guess what? They are not going to get any save whatsoever, and you are going to crush these guys. Same thing goes with these guys that have the 1+ armor. All of a sudden, you're reducing that by 4, goes to a 2, 3, 4, 5+ save. A 5+, that's it. And you're just going to be decimating these guys and taking them off. So really, this is the major reason to take the Black Orcs is they give you that one thing that you can't get anywhere else. And that's where I was really talking about. I mean, people look at them like, oh, look at what they do with the 2 Choppas, or look how weak they are with the shield. That's really corner case. In all my games I've been playing with my Black Orcs, I can maybe think of 1 or 2 games where maybe it's like, oh, it could have been nice to have the shields, but that's it. And I've played like hundreds of games with my Orcs and Goblins. The 2 Choppas, you bet, that comes up sometimes. When are you going to be running 2 Choppas? Well, there's a couple of reasons there. One of them might be when you're going after buildings. You're only going to be getting the 10 of guys attacking anyway, and the nice thing is whenever you're assaulting the buildings and you have the Flaming Banner, you get to re-roll to wound. So a lot of times with that strength 5, you're already wounding on a 2 or a 3+ anyway. So if you get that re-rolled, yeah, leave the great the great weapons at home and just decimate the guys, right? Just tear them apart. The other thing sometimes is when you go up against other units that also have great weapons, especially if they're a smaller size, and like, okay, I can go into these guys with their great weapons and I might be able to beat them with my great weapons too, but they're going to strip off like a rank off me. And I know I'm still going to be fighting that horde over there, so I can't take these losses. Well, what are you going to do? Go to your 2 Choppas. You can strike first, decimate almost all of them. They might kill a few back, and then they're done. Obviously, if this is like a horde of great weapons, it's not really going to work that way, but it's still nice to have those options, and that 2 Choppa thing still comes in. Vast majority of the time, you're going to go with the great weapon, but hey, it's great to have that option for the 2 Choppas too. Now, I already talked about the whole thing with the Flaming Banner, but it's also nice to have the option for the other banners as well. I mean, another one I really like with them is having the Banner of Discipline, the +1 leadership. There's 2 reasons why you'd be doing this. One, this is a unit where because they aren't really low leadership, they are immune to psych, they can pretty much always win their battles, you can put them off on the flanks. And that's usually the big thing that's an issue for Orcs and Goblins, is that you have a lot of leadership issues and you only have that one bubble that you have with your General and BSB. So to have a unit, you can say like, yeah, I can put these guys in a flank and they're just fine. Making sure that they're leadership 9, so in that case where they are fighting a monster or 2 monsters and they're going to lose that first round of combat, but then they'll be able to finish them off in the second round, it's good to be steadfast on that 9, then the steadfast 8, or if you're planning to be running your general from the unit, that's just a way to make your general higher leadership. It's just like we were talking about where I like taking that my level 4, put him in the unit so I don't have to worry about animosity stealing away my magic phase. Well, if that's going to be my general, I can leave him there, have the Banner of Discipline, and all of a sudden I still have a leadership 9 general, just like if I was to take a war boss. So very nice synergies there. Another nice one, too, that can work, whether it's in the middle or on the flanks, wherever, is the Banner of Swiftness. Now, +1 inch might not sound like a lot, but when they're trying to march up the flank to try and get around something, that extra 2 inches can make a big deal. Plus, when you're trying to charge and gain that extra inch there, too, that can be the difference between making the charge or not making the charge. I've heard some other people talking about some of the other banners. I think the armor piercing is one that some people talk about. But really, why would you do that? I mean, I can understand if you're going with the 2 Choppas and maybe making that minuses there. But for the most part, just go with those great weapons, just destroy them type thing, right? So I wouldn't really go with that. I can see where some cases it's the right idea. But for the most part, I really like those other 3 banners. Now, some of the other things you can also do is we were talking about putting them on the flanks. And I mean, the next question here is, well, how many Black Orcs should we take? You've already convinced me, Malorian. I understand now Black Orcs are awesome. How many should I take? Well, you guys have seen my list, and I take 40. Now, 40 is very big. We're talking about a unit that's now going to be around 500 points. And that's a big chunk of your army. Now, is 40 the perfect number? Well, no. There's a couple of reasons why I take it. One, you always want to have more than the 30. I mean, if it's going to be in Horde, you don't want to be at the point where, especially with great weapons, that you're going to be taking losses before you attack, because it's just basically just wasted attacks. So you want to have a little bit more than that peak. Now, how far do you want to go? Well, again, you probably want to go more than the 5, so you get that 3rd rank. And I just like it around that 10. I think it's really just a thing where I like it symmetrical, so it's a cute little box. But yeah, whether it's 40 or 39 or 38 or 42, whatever it is, it's just giving that little bit extra. And really even a thing too where, you're going for at least 5 so that you get that extra rank. The main thing you want here, I mean, really you're going to be getting all your combat res through kills. The very most important thing here is you need enough to actually stand up to some of these other hordes. Because the worst thing that you can sometimes see is you get horde on horde combat, they rip each other apart, you kind of go through, and all of a sudden another unit just comes in and cleans you up. And what that really does is makes it so that if you have a game that's based off of victory points and you need the biggest difference possible, if it's not just win-loss, and let's say it's a 20-0 system, all of a sudden if you don't want to be giving up points, it's very important that you have those extra guys there so you can actually survive this and not get wiped out after you knock out your target. It's also a thing too where you don't always beat everybody on the first round of combat, so you need to have enough models there to actually survive. Should you go to 50 models? That's kind of pushing it. I mean, I've seen guys that just take like a few massive blocks, and if you're playing for the whole super point denial, sure, take your 50% of your list and just make one massive black orc list. Sure, yeah, that kind of works. But then all of a sudden, if you're playing scenario tournaments, that doesn't work. So for me, for the most part, 40 is where I go. Now, there are different options depending on what you're going to do. Now, we already talked about with a bunker. We could take a bunker at 10 or 15, something like that. But, there's also the idea that you could take these black orcs on the flank, because these guys aren't bad flankers when you really think about it. I mean, really for a throwaway unit on the flank, if you take your 10 black orcs for your 120 points, that's in the throwaway unit area, and these black orcs put out a lot of points. One of the biggest things, like we talked about before on the flanks, is you want something that's going to be reliable. It's not going to just panic off the board with a couple of losses. So being immune to psych is perfect for that. And these guys can just kind of like go around, and that's where this versatility really comes up. Because if you're up against some facile, weak units on the flank, you can just clear those guys right out. If you're then joining on to the flanks, try and add those extra attacks, whether you need the great weapons or the two-hand weapons, whatever, you're good to go. So I can see that. I've only really played around it very little, but I really do understand how that could work, having these little units on the flanks. Of course, again, you have to really watch out for if you are playing the games where you don't want to be giving up victory points. They are something you might have to worry about, and you might not want it then. But in a main thing where you're just trying to get the win or whatever, I can understand how that can work for you. So that's really the black orcs. I mean, we've been talking for 20 minutes about black orcs here, but there is, just so many good reasons to use them. For the most part, they are just a very solid unit. Now, of course, the big thing is whenever you do a comparison to something like your Savage Orc Biggins, who just seem to be just better. Because, I mean, at one point, you have like the 1 strength 7 or this 2 strength 5, and the Savages just have that 3 strength 5. And you know what? That can be pretty damn awesome. If you do go with the synergies with the Shrunken Head and they have the 5+ ward, that's pretty damn awesome there. But the real thing here is it almost gets to the point where, okay, it's guaranteed Savage Orc Biggins are the best unit in the book, maybe in the game. Well, you can't just take just Savage Orc Biggins. You just can't do that. You need other units as well. So what's the next best unit? Well, Black Orcs are pretty damn awesome. So that's where they come in, where, they might be not the complete best, but they're definitely, in the second best, especially if you're not going to be going for the big, huge points of the trolls. And then they just give you so much versatility. They give you that strength 7 you can't get anywhere else. And just the things that give you for your general and for your level 4, making sure that animosity won't steal it away. They are just amazing. So there you go. There's Black Orcs, and man, go out there and use them. Bye.